Harp on Sports, the Bar, podcast, media, audio, and radio network. What do we have in store for you on this edition of the program? The Jordan rules. No, not the Michael Jordan rules. The Jordan Travis rules. What on earth is the College Football Committee going to do with a team that is now missing their Heisman candidate at quarterback and now needs to figure out what to do when evaluating said team? Should they run the table? If they lose, they'll be out. But if they run the table, what do you do? There is precedent to this, but two totally different scenarios, and they both happened in the same year. So we're going to look back on that, look forward to what they're going to do with Florida State. Also, the Heisman high five. 5 people can win this sucker. It's pretty remarkable with 2 weeks to go that 5 people can win this thing. There's one really long shot. I shouldn't say really long shot. There's a long shot. There's one guy that has to win next weekend and then has to put on a show of almost biblical proportions. It's capable of it. Then there's one guy that is the front runner, but I think his journey's over. And then probably the winner will come out of this one game. So we're going to look at that as well. And best of the rest. With the Chiefs and the Eagles coming up Monday Night Football, that I look at who has the best shot to dethrone them in order. Best of the rest with just 6 weeks to go. Harp on Sports, again, the Bar, podcast, media, audio, radio network. You want to follow us? Easy enough. At Harp on Sports Twitter, at Harp on Sports Instagram, Harp on Sports auditory route. You can hear the Bar, Spotify, Buzzsprout, Apple Podcast, Harp on Sports, the Bar, Harp on Sports Facebook page, Harp on Sports, the Bar, the YouTube channel, and of course, harponsports.com. All right, let's start off with this. The Jordan rules. There was a time, it's hard to believe, 30 years ago, that the Jordan rules went into effect. What were they? They were the way for teams in the Eastern Conference to pound on Michael Jordan. Well, get ready, because here come the Jordan rules, as now teams with one loss make their case against Florida State when it comes to the College Football Playoff. What does this team look like with Rodemaker at quarterback as opposed to Jordan Travis? Well, you're going to get 2 big games to find out, right? You're going to get Florida in the swamp, and then you're going to get what? Then you're going to get Louisville ACC championship game in Charlotte. Now, Jordan Daniels should have been invited to New York. Go back and look at his numbers before he got hurt against North Alabama, and he was going to score 4 or 5 touchdowns in that game. Just status quo would tell you that. 25 touchdowns, 2 picks on the year. He was going to have 30-2 or 28-2 heading into the Florida game. Was Jordan Travis going to win the Heisman? Probably not, but he should have gone to New York. Now he won't. So you remove a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback from the equation. They bounced back and drilled North Alabama. Great. Now you got Florida, who may have their own backup quarterback with Max Brown. And then Louisville, who has just an ugly loss under their belt against Pitt, but has looked pretty good and found a way to win against Miami. Not a great team, but a top 15 team. So what do you do? And there's a little bit of precedent for this. It happened in the same year. There was a debate what to do with Florida State because Florida State was struggling in the first college football playoff year with Jameis Winston, and they fell all the way down the ladder to, 3rd? They were undefeated defending national champs, and just kept falling and finished 3rd. Ohio State was 4th with their 3rd-string quarterback, Cardale Jones. So Ohio State works their way to 4th with their 3rd-stringer, and on that last week jumped TCU and Baylor in the final week of the year with the 3rd-string quarterback. So there's precedent of coming up, precedent of falling back too. Jameis Winston, Florida State struggling, falling back. Now there was talk, what happens if Jameis Winston is ruled ineligible? How does that phase in the deciding ground? Well, it's not fair to punish the rest of the team. Yeah, but the team's not the same without this guy. We've seen it in the NCAA basketball tournament with Kenyon Martin in Cincinnati 25 years ago. He gets hurt. They fall from a 1 seed to a 2 seed. So we have seen guys drop or guys' injuries affect seedings. So what happens? Well, it depends on what Rodemaker does, right? If they come out Florida State and they beat Florida by 17 to 24 points and then beat Louisville by double digits, it's a moot point. They're in. Well, they've struggled. Oh, okay, they're in. They're 14-0. They're in. 13-0. What are you going to? What's the spin going to be? Well, you look at the odds. If Alabama loses to Georgia, and this is what you'll hear from SEC fans, well, look at the odds. Vegas would say, well, if that's the case, you don't even need to play. Just look at the odds. Why even have a playoff? Cincinnati wouldn't have been invited a couple years ago. You're going to go with the team that's going to be the closest when it comes to point spreads? Then put LSU in, because LSU with Jordan Daniels would have a better crack at Alabama or Georgia than said Florida State with a backup quarterback. But it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. Resume. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this. The eyeball test is everything for Florida State the rest of the way. Everything. Should it knock them down a peg? Maybe. College Football Playoff Committee, when the poll comes out this week, Georgia should be far and away number one. And then it doesn't really matter what you do after that for the time being with Ohio State and Washington. Because you have Oregon and Washington coming up. You got Ohio State and Michigan coming up. Doesn't matter what you do, except what you do with Florida State. But you could put Florida State as the fourth undefeated team right now. Well, you got 5 undefeated teams. You could have Florida State on the outside looking in. So what? Ohio State plays Michigan this week. If you went number 1, Georgia, number 2, Ohio State, number 3, Washington, number 4, Michigan, number 5, Florida State, and dropped Florida State and said, prove it. Okay, well, Ohio State plays Michigan. That knocks one of them out. And then Ohio State, and then Florida State sitting there at 5. Okay, Florida State goes out, takes care of business against Florida. They naturally move up. Florida State runs a table, they're going to get in. But it'll be interesting to see what this does. And this is, nobody talks about the inverse effect. What happens if they come out and they beat Florida by 30 and just crush Louisville? Do you bump them then? If you say that they struggle without Jordan Travis, okay, and you're going to punish them. What if they overachieve with the new guy? Does that count? Jordan rules. We'll see. Again, because with this guy, I don't know what we have. If I were ranking, I'd drop him. I would. I'd go Georgia 1. I'd go Washington 2. Ohio State 3, Michigan 4, Florida State 5. That's what I would do. Florida State goes out and they take care of business and thump Florida. Okay. Ohio State, Michigan loser naturally is out. Florida State's sitting there at 4 now. Oregon sits there at 5. Texas 6, Alabama 7. Oh boy, do we have a fun conference championship weekend. Now you can put Michigan back there at 5 and leave Florida State at 4. Fine, doesn't matter. If Michigan then beats Ohio State, then they jump up. Michigan loses, then they're down there and they're gone. So you could set that this poll can be entirely about drama. Where it gets kind of finicky is if Florida State drops behind Oregon. There's where it gets crooked. Can go awry in a hurry. But it'll be interesting to see what the Jordan rules are. But the sad thing is he's not going to go to New York, and he should have. Speaking of New York, Heisman Trophy. Oh, by the way, again, if I'm ranking, 1 Georgia, 2 Washington, 3 Ohio State, 4 Michigan, 5 Florida State, 6 Oregon, 7 Texas. Where we're going? 8 Alabama, 9 Louisville. That's what I would do. Got the 5 unbeatens, 6, 7, 8. Oregon, Texas, Bama. Well, it's going to be interesting to see what they do if Alabama wins and beats Georgia, because then it's the best win in the country. But then what do you do if Texas already is beating Alabama? If they win the Big 12 and then Oregon beats Washington to be the second biggest win in the country, how do you stink those one-loss teams up? Should be a lot of fun. Speaking of Heisman, Jordan Travis is out. Would have gone. Who slides into his place? I've got Carson Beck here. And you can break the Heisman down into 3 different tiers right now. You can. 3 different tiers. Carson Beck's the long shot. What did I look at him? What's he got? 20 touchdowns, couple of picks, 3,500 yards passing. Why? Look, if he lights up Alabama, there you go. Now, Georgia Tech's going to have to be one of those games where he throws for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns to boost his stats up into that range, because Michael Penix Jr. had a pedestrian night against Oregon State. Bo Nix didn't. Bo Nix, to me, is the front runner, although I'm going to make a case why Jaden Daniels could be the front runner right now. But to me, it's Bo Nix is to lose. So this is how I look at this. Carson Beck's your long shot. You have to have some Marvin Harrison. I'm going to get to Marvin Harrison Jr. here in a second, but basically everybody would have to fall apart. You'd have to have one of the worst Pac-12 championship games of all time. And then Carson Beck would have to just eat Alabama's lunch. So there's your long shot. The next one in that list, the fourth, the guy, this is where the guys that should be invited. Marvin Harrison Jr. should be invited. You look at his numbers, he's got 1,100 yards and 13 touchdowns. Here's where he needs to have an iconic moment against Michigan. If he can have an iconic moment or two against Michigan, and against Michigan, I'm going to give you some numbers. He's going to have to do 140 and 2, 140 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns. Why? That gets him to 15 touchdowns and close to 1,300 yards receiving. And then with those numbers, you can start to look around and go, okay, against Iowa, a really good defense on the stage, prime time, Saturday night, Big Ten championship. All right. But he's going to have those numbers, and Ohio State's going to have to win. If Ohio State goes into Michigan and wins, it means Marvin Harrison Jr.'s had a big day. So if Marvin Harrison Jr., I remember when Tim Biakabatuka, Michigan, ate Ohio State alive when he had like 300 yards rushing 30 years ago now. If he can do something like that, not 300 yards receiving, but if Marvin Harrison Jr. can have a couple of touchdowns and $150 receiving and Ohio State wins, he's going to New York. And then the question is, can he do enough in the Big Ten championship window to boost him over the top? Because he's going to be all alone that night. Because Carson Beck is going to have played earlier. Florida State, Louisville doesn't have a contender. Jaden Daniels, probably your front runner right now, but he's out of smoke. He's out of smoke. He has one more game left, and depending on what he does in that game, that's great. But without a conference championship game, here you go. He's the most dynamic player in college football. I get it. Bo Nix is having a better season, if you will. To me, the best quarterback, dual threat, is Jaden Daniels. The best player, Marvin Harrison Jr. So these are different debates and different discussions. It depends on your preference, right? Do you want steak? Do you want chicken? What do you want? Crab? What do you want? Surf and turf. That's what you want. So, to me, Jaden Daniels and Michael Penix Jr. did struggle, and he's kind of sitting there now. Oh my gosh, what does he do? But you have a Michael Penix Jr. Bo Nix game. I think the winner of that. I think if Oregon wins, Bo Nix will have a big game, and Bo Nix will win the Heisman. Now, Oregon could always lose to Oregon State, and then that starts to make things a little bit more interesting. Because if they lose to Oregon State, then Bo Nix has a big game. They're still not going to win that conference, and Bo Nix almost has to be there at 11-1. But I still think it's Bo Nix's to lose. Right now, Jaden Daniels is in the lead, but to steal a car racing metaphor, I got a full tank of gas and fresh tires. You got a half tank of gas, and your tires are about 20 laps old. We got 10 laps to go. My fuel gauge and my fresh tires are going to catch you. I'm going to catch you. I got too much speed. I'm going to catch you. Too much going for me. There you go. But to me, Carson Beck and Marvin Harrison Jr. are in that Carson Beck real long shot. Marvin Harrison Jr. needs to win, needs to have monster games. And to me, this is where you are with Marvin Harrison Jr. Against Michigan and against Iowa, you're talking he's going to have 320 plus yards receiving and at least 4 or 5 touchdowns. And then there you get to 17 or 18 touchdowns and 1,400, 1,500 yards. Then you can start to have that discussion. Iconic moment, Charles Woodson punt return for a touchdown. At the Ohio State moment for Charles Woodson was, and Desmond Howard had one too, right, against Ohio State. You have those iconic moments, one in reverse this time for Ohio State. What do I think happens when all is said and done? I think Bo Nix wins it. I think Nix wins it. Jaden Daniels finishes second, and then third will be Michael Penix Jr., and fourth will be Marvin Harrison Jr. I think that's what you're going to see. Long way to go in terms of 2 weeks to figure this out, but it's up for grabs. It really is. I think 4 guys can win it with the one long shot in Carson Beck, but even he can win it. He comes out and he throws for 300, 400 yards, something like that, and Oregon struggles and Washington struggles a little bit in their games. Ohio State gets beat by Michigan. You bet Carson Beck can stick his nose in this thing when it's all said and done. But to me, Nix, Daniels, and Penix are locks to be invited. Beck and Harrison now, with one more big showing, will both be in. Or at least Marvin Harrison Jr. will be in. From that to this, the best of the rest. Best of the rest. With the Chiefs and the Eagles set for Monday night, look around the rest of the league and say, okay, the Chiefs and the Eagles, probably a Super Bowl preview, but seldom do those things actually pan out. Somebody loses. So I wanted to go through and look at this and who's got actually the best shot to knock these guys off. And to me, there are 7 teams other than the Chiefs or the Eagles that can go to the Super Bowl. That's it. That's it. And one of them's a puncher's shot. They really are. In the NFC, it's the Eagles. Then I have after the Eagles, and I have the Niners. The Niners are starting to cook. Niners are starting to cook here a little bit. Problem with this is San Francisco's going to have to go to Philly. I thought the Seahawks may be able to push them in that division, but the Seahawks had an ugly loss on Sunday. So right now I have the Niners 2, Cowboys 3, Lions 4. I know that's not the seedings, but that's where I'd stick it right now. Eagles 1, Niners 2, Cowboys 3, Lions 4. And the thing that kind of burns on this a little bit, barring any upsets, the Eagles are going to have to play the Cowboys in the postseason at home. So, yeah. Still a threat. Still a threat. So, Eagles, Niners, Cowboys, Lions. Niners, Cowboys, Lions. That's it. I don't see nobody else in the NFC is going to get there. No way. Because then you start talking about, okay, well, who's the other division leaders? Okay, the Lions are division leader. The Niners are division leader. The Eagles are division leader. Who's the 4th division leader? Saints? All right, the Cowboys are going to drill them. Then what? You're going to tell me the Vikings are going to go win 3 in a row on the road? Come on. Or who else is going to go win 3 in a row on the road? The Seahawks going to win 3 in a row on the road? Not going to happen. The Cowboys could do that. You bet they could. They're the only team that can do that. Only team in the NFC that could do that. Or the Eagles in juxtaposition. But that's it. If I had to guess right now, realistically, it's going to be the Eagles, the Niners, the Cowboys. The Lions, if they can get the 2 seed and have home field, then they get to host the Niners. That thing makes things a little bit more interesting. But any scenario that involves somebody having to go to Philly, the Niners and the Cowboys, I think the only 2 teams that could win there. Even that's a long shot. AFC's a little bit more open. It is. But I just have a tough time seeing the Dolphins or the Jags going into Arrowhead or Baltimore for that matter and winning. And now I know the Browns are making it a little bit more interesting, but the Ravens are going to win that division. And now this is where the battle begins. With Monday night, if the Chiefs beat the Eagles, then the AFC pretty much at that point, the Chiefs would have to lose. Well, the Ravens, the Jags, and the Dolphins could only lose 1 game the rest of the year, and the Chiefs would have to lose at least 2, and that would just get you a tie. So the AFC are gigantic Eagles fans Monday night, because if the Chiefs win that sucker, then all of a sudden the margin of error is 1 game, and the Chiefs have to lose 2 in the final 5-6 weeks. It's going to be tough to do that because they're going to start to pick up some steam. So when I look at it, most likely Super Bowl are the Eagles and what? Eagles and the Chiefs. Then the next likely, I've got the Niners and the Ravens. In order, Chiefs in the AFC, Eagles in the NFC. Then I said the Niners, Cowboys, and Lions in that order. In the AFC, Chiefs followed by what? The Ravens. Then I've got the Jags, the Dolphins. I got the Jags a little bit ahead of Miami because the Jags can play defense. Jags can play some defense. And Trevor Lawrence, both those teams are really, really close. And then I got the Bills as a puncher's chance. I got the Bills as a puncher's chance because the Bills sit there at 6-5 after what they just did to the Jets. And my mind sits here as you start to go through this and say, okay, it's 6-5. If they could finish, if they're the 6th seed and all of a sudden the Bills are going to Jacksonville or the Bills are going to Miami, that makes things a little bit interesting. If the Bills are going to Baltimore as the 7 and the 2, it's going to be tough for Buffalo, but Buffalo can travel. Josh Allen still is that guy that can flip that switch. With quarterbacks like that, yeah, it's feast or famine, but you can go on the road and win. You can go on the road and win. Big games like that, you bet you can. Gunslinger can hurt you, can also heal you in a hurry. So they're still that team that it's 6-5 that if somehow they can get there at, again, if they can go 11-6, go 5-1, even 10-7, and they're sitting there as the 6, as long as the Bills and the Ravens don't play each other, the Jags or the Dolphins will have their hands full with Buffalo. They will. Especially if it's late in the year and Buffalo plays Miami the last week of the year and they turn around and play right again. Kind of gets crazy there. But why I give this a chance? Because if the Dolphins could be like a 6 seed and then let's say the Dolphins could knock off the Jags, then the Bills, if the Bills can be like the 6 seed, knock off the Jags or knock off the Dolphins, then the Bills will go to Kansas City, and we've already seen Buffalo give Kansas City problems in Arrowhead. There's where you get your puncher's chance. But I think it's the Ravens. If I had to rank, Chiefs, Eagles, then in the AFC, the Ravens, followed by what? The Jags, because of their defense, Dolphins, and then Bills. Nobody else got shot. Seth, what about the Browns? Go ahead. Fall in love with them. Saints, no. Browns, no. Vikings, no. Seahawks, no. 7 teams have a shot. And even the Bills is dramatic George Foreman, Michael Moore type of long shot. There you go. Harp on Sports, the Bar. Podcast, media, audio, radio network. Follow, share, like, subscribe at Harp on Sports. Twitter at Harp on Sports. Instagram. Remember, auditory route, Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcast under Harp on Sports, the Bar headings. Harp on Sports Facebook page. Harp on Sports the YouTube channel. And of course, harponsports.com. Remember, stay clean, stay focused. Stay strong. Frankenstein. Have fun with your friends.